Chapter 4. Don't be deceived. Electoral College versus popular vote. There's a lot of talk these days about changing the presidential election to a popular vote. After all, that seems like it'd be a better democratic process and more fair, right? Wrong. There's a reason every single Democratic candidate running for president is in favor of this. I already mentioned in a prior chapter that people who don't want anything to do with God are drawn to that party. That means Satan is behind the things they support. Something is afoot with this whole popular vote business, and I'm going to expose it for you. The U.S. is not a pure democracy. We're a democratic, constitutional republic. There's a big difference between the two. In a pure democracy, the majority always rules, and minorities have little to no say. Democracies easily give birth to tyrants and dictators. In the U.S., we have representatives that are democratically elected, where the rules of the government and rights of the people are established in a constitution. The Constitution of the U.S. details how the president, vice president, and members of Congress are chosen. We have a House of Representatives and a Senate because they represent two different groups. The House of Representatives is just like it sounds. The members represent the population of each state. They serve a 2-year term, so the entire House is elected every 2 years. Each representative is chosen based on a popular vote of registered voters in their state. The candidate with the most votes in the state election wins. The Constitution establishes the number of seats in the House. It's currently set at 435. Each 10-year census is what determines how many seats each state gets out of that 435. Every state gets at least one representative. The bigger states will obviously have more representatives than the smaller states. My state of New Mexico has 3 representatives, while California has the most with 53. That also means the bigger, more urban states have more influence in the House. That's because the House was established to represent the people. The Senate is quite a bit different from the House. Senators represent the states. They serve a 6-year term, and 1/3 of them are elected every 2 years. Each state gets 2 senators, so every single state has an equal vote, equal influence, and equal say. We are the United States, after all. Each state is unique in its culture, its natural resources, its jobs, and its challenges. It's important for each state to have a voice in government and foreign affairs. Now, it used to be that senators were chosen by their state legislatures. The 17th Amendment, ratified in 1913, changed it so that senators are elected by a popular vote just like representatives in the House. Here's where we get to the Electoral College. The Constitution gives each state their number of electors. It's equal to their number of senators plus their number of representatives. Using my example from earlier, New Mexico has 5 electors, 2 senators plus 3 representatives, and California has 55 electors, 2 senators plus 53 representatives. The Constitution lets each state determine their electors however they see fit. Your state's electors are not your actual senators and representatives. They are a separate group of people chosen specifically for the task of voting for the president and vice president. That's it. They are expected to vote for the candidates of the party that selected them. The Constitution also lets each state decide how their electoral votes are awarded to the presidential candidates. Most states, 48 of them, use a winner-take-all system. That means whoever wins the popular vote in the state gets all the electoral votes. Maine and Nebraska are the exceptions. They use a district system in which electoral votes are allocated based on who won the popular vote in each congressional district. Let's see an example of how this works. California has 55 electors, so each political party would select 55 people that pledge to vote for the president and vice president candidates chosen by their party. Come National Election Day, let's say the Democratic Party president and vice president candidates win the popular vote in California. Since this is a winner-take-all state, that means the 55 electors the Democratic Party chose get to cast their vote for president and vice president. The electors represent the people, so they're expected to confirm their state's choice of candidate. All 55 electoral votes would go to the Democratic Party president and vice president candidates. This same thing happens in every other state. Electoral votes are awarded to the winner of the state's popular vote. With this method, each state gets a say in who is elected president. In the 2016 election, Trump won the popular vote in 30 states. That's 60% of the U.S. voting for him. Here's how a writer for the National Review put it. Do we want a president who wins by running up the score in 1 or 2 states? Or do we want a president who wins by garnering narrower victories in a wide array of states? Clinton won New York and California. Trump won Texas and Florida and North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and even one electoral vote in Maine. He won the Electoral College by assembling a more politically and geographically diverse group of states than Clinton did. In our system, winning the Electoral College confers legitimacy because such a victory exemplifies the reality the Electoral College was created to ground in our political order, that the United States is a federal union of semi-sovereign states. So what would a national presidential election look like if we ditched the Electoral College and went with the national popular vote? Well, it would eliminate almost every state's influence in selecting the president. The 4 biggest states have 30% of the registered voters in America: California, Texas, Florida, New York. It only takes 10 states to get to 50% of the registered voters. 10 states. That's all it would take for a candidate to win the presidency. They'd only have to garner support from people in the most populous states. That's only 20% of America, people. Do you really want to elect a president that the majority of states oppose? What kind of United States would that be? It wouldn't be united at all. Now we've gotten to the truth of this. Let's look at the 2016 election and the popular vote a bit closer. Clinton won the national popular vote by 2.8 million people. She got 48% of the vote compared to Trump at 46%. But did you know that Clinton got 4.3 million more votes than Trump in California? If you remove the biggest state from the national popular vote equation, suddenly the picture changes a lot. Excluding California, Trump won the national popular vote by 1.4 million votes. That's how much one large state can impact a national election. This is why the Founding Fathers liked the Electoral College so much. It's because it prevents a candidate who is only popular at a regional level from dominating a national election. This is why the Democrats are pushing for a national popular vote. They want California and New York to rule the U.S. That's what this is all about. They want to force their policies on the rest of the states. We are not a country run by 1 or 2 states. We cannot let the big states bully all the others into voting like them. We must remember, we are a country run by 50 states that each get a say in the government. We do not let the majority enslave the minority here. Do not let Satan steal your vote. Do not let Satan divide this country. Here's how a writer for the Mental Recession explains it. The Electoral College is a system that prevents areas with massive populations, such as the liberal cesspools of New York and California, from exclusively deciding who leads the rest of the country. It gives voice to sparsely populated areas in Middle America and levels out those from densely populated coastal elite locales. New York is a microcosm of this. Governor Andrew Cuomo wins election every cycle because he captures areas such as Long Island, New York City, and areas in Buffalo, while the majority of the state overwhelmingly rejects him. These areas control what happens in the entire state, much to the detriment of upstate New York. If you don't believe the big liberal states want to steal your vote, here's something truly nefarious that's happening under your nose that you need to know about. It's called the National Popular Vote Initiative. Since the Constitution established the Electoral College, And it'll take an amendment to the Constitution to alter that. This nonprofit group is going a different route, bypassing the very foundation our government is built upon. They're using an interstate compact among states where states agree to tell their electors to vote for the candidate who won the national popular vote instead of the candidate who won their state's popular vote. They're stealing a state's vote. Unbelievable, I know. Yet, they've already convinced 15 states to join this unholy alliance. No surprise California and New York have signed up. I'm quite torqued that my state of New Mexico has as well. Think your state is too smart for this? Think again. Arizona and Oklahoma, it's already passed in one of your legislative chambers. The fact this isn't going to the voters in each state says a lot as well. They're being sly about it for a reason. How would you like your state's choice of president to not count? I don't think we have to worry too much about this, though. This alliance doesn't go into effect unless they get a majority of the states to sign up. And it seems to me this clearly violates Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, which prohibits states from entering into alliances. I doubt this will hold up in the courts if they manage to convince enough states to give away their votes. Consider this another piece of evidence that highlights how Satan is behind this national popular vote business. There's something else we must take into account when looking at the popular vote historically. In liberal states like California, where they have an overwhelming majority of Democrat voters, how many Republicans do you think turned out to vote in the national election? I bet many of them stayed home knowing their vote wasn't going to sway their state's choice. We have to be careful about using a number, like historical popular vote, in a way it's not meant to be used. If the rules were changed and we elected a president based on national popular vote, it would have a radical impact on voter turnout. Now, speaking of voter turnout, there's another topic we must discuss that's grabbing headlines, and it has a big impact on elections. It's voter ID. The Constitution states that American citizens aged 18 and over have the right to vote. When you register to vote, how do they know you're eligible to vote? The National Male Voter Registration Form asks if you're a citizen and when your birth date is. But do they check? There's an ID number field you're supposed to fill out that has state-specific instructions. For California, you just list your driver's license number. Guess who can get a driver's license in California? Pretty much anyone, including illegal aliens, people who aren't citizens. You also don't have to be 18 to get a driver's license. So how does a state like California know that you're eligible to register to vote? That's the point. They don't. The National Registration Form clearly states that if you're registering to vote for the first time, that you must show proof of identification when you show up to vote for the first time. So how does that work in states that don't have voter ID laws like California and New Mexico? Indeed. There are 16 states that don't have a voter ID law. Opponents to voter ID claim it's a burden for people to show proof of ID. I'm really not buying that argument. We have to show ID to carry out normal activities here, opening a bank account, getting a job, buying alcohol, and traveling via plane, to name a few. Yet, it's a burden to show it when voting? Come on. Well, perhaps it's not a big deal. That's what the Democrats are saying, after all. That there isn't any fraud in voting. Do you believe that? Judicial Watch has an election integrity project that's shining a light on this. Check out these statements of the Judicial Watch findings by a reporter with the National Review. At least 3.5 million more people are on U.S. election rolls than are eligible to vote. My tabulation of Judicial Watch's state-by-state results yielded 462 counties where the registration rate exceeded 100%. All told, California is a veritable haunted house, teeming with 1,736,556 ghost voters. President Donald J. Trump supporters might be intrigued to learn that Hillary Clinton's margins of victory in Colorado, 136,386, and New Hampshire, 2,736, were lower than the numbers of ghost voters in those states. Clinton's fans should know that Trump won Michigan, 10,704, and North Carolina, 173,315, by fewer ballots than ghost voters in those states. Judicial Watch is also suing North Carolina for failing to clean up its voter registration data. They state North Carolina data reveals that they have nearly 1 million inactive voters on its rolls. In just 19 North Carolina counties, 20% of the registrations are inactive. The national median state inactive rate is only 9.6%. Wow. They found 3.5 million people are registered who shouldn't be. Here's another interesting story. A recent Breitbart article indicates that data from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and other sources show that 42.4 million ballots were mailed to registered voters in the 2018 election. Of those, 10.5 million went missing. That's almost a quarter of the ballots. Los Angeles County accounted for 1.4 million of those missing mail-in ballots. With the coronavirus outbreak, the Democrats are pushing for mail-in voting without any identification requirements or witness signatures on the ballots. Despite what they say, they aren't pushing this for wholesome reasons. Why would they be willing to hold up relief bills to include this? President Trump has rightly criticized this and pointed out that voting by mail is ripe for fraud. Common sense tells you there are many opportunities for fraud to occur with a mailed-in ballot. The Democrats know this too. They have an evil intent behind pushing this scheme. Here are just a few ways fraud can occur via the mail. Someone can vote more than once by requesting absentee ballots in multiple states, or by voting by mail and in person. Ballot harvesting is the biggie. This is when someone hand-delivers your ballot and waits for you to fill it out, or they conveniently pick up your ballot for you, or they hand you a ballot already filled out and request your signature. Don't ever sign a ballot that's already filled in. Anytime there's a person between you and your ballot being counted, there's a potential for something nefarious to happen. Who's to say that person is really going to take your ballot and make sure it's counted? They could throw it away if they know or think you voted for the candidate they don't want to win. Who's to say the person who opens your ballot is going to make sure it's counted? How do you know your ballot even got delivered? It could go missing. Unless you vote in person at the machine, or you feed your paper ballot into the machine, there's no way to know for sure that you actually had a say in the election. I already pointed out above that we've had a problem with mailed ballots going missing in the prior national elections. If states mail ballots out to everyone who's registered, there will be millions of ballots sent out that shouldn't be because the voter rolls aren't clean. Do you think someone who receives a ballot for a dead relative or someone who lived at their residence previously but moved away will be tempted to fill it out? Would a corrupt election official fill it out for their preferred candidate? Unfortunately, it happens. The Heritage Foundation recently shared over 1,000 examples of voter fraud across the U.S. Many of the examples they shared were absentee ballot fraud. Nothing to see here. Move along. That's what Satan wants you to do. To think it's no big deal when in reality, it's a huge deal. This voter fraud most certainly impacted the national popular vote in 2016. Just think of how this is also impacting smaller local elections, where a few votes make all the difference. We must push for in-person voting until there's a secure way to vote by mail. We need a national voter ID law to combat non-citizens from voting. Until we have that, Satan will continue stealing votes. Would you like to know about another way Satan is stealing your vote? It seems pretty innocuous on the surface. It's that we don't have a citizenship question on the census. I mentioned earlier that the 10-year census is what determines how many seats each state gets in the House of Representatives. Now, why do you think all the Democrats are opposed to asking this simple question on the census? It's because non-citizens fill out the census. Here's the shocking truth about this as spoken by a reporter with Breitbart. Research by the Center for Immigration Studies, Stephen Camarata and Karen Ziegler, finds that annual illegal and legal immigration to the U.S. will redistribute political power in the form of 26 House seats away from a number of red states and towards massively populated blue states like California and New York. California by 2020 is set to gain 11 congressional seats solely due to the fact that non-citizens, rather than just American citizens, are counted in congressional apportionment. As Breitbart News has chronicled for years, the counting of only American citizens to divide up congressional districts and electoral college votes would shift power away from the affluent metropolitan coastal cities of the U.S. and towards Middle America. So, there you have the truth. California and New York are enticing immigrants to their states by promising them all sorts of free stuff because they're hoping to steal votes away from Middle America. It's imperative that we know how many non-citizens are in each state. The national election is on the line. With the 2020 national election coming up, be mindful of Satan trying to steal your vote. If someone comes to your door and hands you a ballot to fill out, don't do it. If you must vote absentee, make sure you mail it or drop it off yourself. Don't give your ballot to anyone. Satan could easily throw those away or alter them. Don't sign a ballot someone else has already filled out. If you need assistance filling out a ballot, make sure the person fills it out exactly the way you tell them to. Vote in person if you can. Remember that we're in a war. Your vote is a weapon in that war. Use it. You are all children of light and children of the day. We don't belong to the night, nor to darkness. So then let's not sleep, as the rest do, but let's watch and be sober. But since we belong to the day, let's be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet, the hope of salvation. 1 Thessalonians 5:5-6 and 8.